Thank you for the information. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started and hopefully get through what we want to talk about and get any questions resolved tonight. My name is Drew. I am one of the program delivery partners here in Alabama. I am also the judge advisor. Joining us tonight, we also have Taylor.
Hey.
Taylor is our other program delivery partner for First Lego League Challenge and First Lego League Explore. She's primarily going to be monitoring the chat for questions. So if you have something you want to ask and you don't want to ask it out loud, just type it in there and Taylor will keep us all apprised of the situation. We also have Jamie McClung. Jamie.
Hello, I'm the first senior mentor. This will be going on the second year I've been in the position, and unfortunately, everything is about as soon as I got it and time to start, COVID started happening. So I hadn't been able to be out and around publicly for any events, hardly as for a senior mentor. So I'm anxious that we can get back to that at some point.
So Jamie is a resource for all of our teams across all of the FIRST programs because of his role as a first senior mentor. So he absolutely is a great resource because of that role. He also has coached a few FLL teams to the Champions Award, as well as mentored other teams to the Champions Award. And he has a lot of experience with the Global Innovation Award, which ties in closely to the Innovation Project. We also will have joining us whenever she is able to pull over and join the Zoom call, a project judge who will be talking a little bit about the rubric and kind of what's judges will kind of see with the Innovation Project. So this is our first coaches webinar of the Cargo Connect season. And tonight we are talking all about the Innovation Project. So I'm going to start and talk a little bit about kind of what this is and how it fits into First Lego League Challenge. Our guest judge is going to talk a little bit about what it's like as a judge seeing your team come through and what our judges look for and what your team can expect the judges to kind of want and expect. And then Jamie's also going to take a turn and he's going to talk a little bit about, from the coaches side of things, what does it take to prepare your team? What does it take to do the Innovation Project? And then we're all here to answer questions. We'll try to stop periodically for questions and try to get those as we have them. Are there any questions so far before we really get going? And you can type it in the chat or you can just raise your hand. Looks like we are good. So I will press onward. So we're going to be sharing a few documents on the screen here, and you'll have access to all these as coaches. I just have to pull down onto here, and I want to share this. All right, so this document is what's called the overview document. This is a PDF that you can download off the FIRST website. It's all digital. It is also included in the engineering notebook. So that's the physical books that the students get. You'll get about 10 of those when you get your materials, and those materials get sent out to all of our paid registered teams. So once you've paid your $225 registration fee, you should get those materials. They're also accessible as PDFs through your ThinkScape on your FIRST dashboard. So a lot of ways to access this document, but this particular document is freely available for anybody just browsing the internet. So I'm kind of happy that our first session is on the Innovation Project, because for me, the Innovation Project is one of the things that makes First Lego League Challenge stand out among other competitions. Almost every other robotics competition you'll see is just that. But First Lego League Challenge is very specifically not a robotics competition. There's a robot competition in it, but that is not the point. As you can see from the overview, there are multiple facets to our competition. Your core values, your designing of the robot, which is separate from how well your robot competes in the game, and then the Innovation Project. So all four of these components make up 1/4 of your overall score at a competition. And so the innovation project is where we think our teacher coaches really thrive because it's what you do in your classrooms. It's very much, something that if a teacher were to have designed this competition, the innovation project is probably where they would start. A few things to note: you've got a 5-minute presentation during judging, and it involves identifying a problem, researching that problem, developing a solution to that problem, and then sharing your solution with others. And that's it. That's all there is to it. And if it were that simple, everybody would win the Innovation Project Award every year, no problem. Now, also in this document, on the 3rd page, is the Innovation Project. So this tells you everything about the Innovation Project in 1 page. Identify a problem, research your problem and solution ideas, design, create a new piece of technology, equipment, method, transportation, share your ideas, create a presentation. And so this year, every year there's a theme, and the theme fits within the overall challenge space. So fitting in with Cargo Connect, we're looking at the question, how can you improve the transportation of products? You'll identify a specific problem, one problem within this theme that you want to solve. Then you will create or improve a piece of equipment, a technology, or a method of transportation to solve your specific problem. So this is the setup for it. And this is a great component of the program, because maybe you're a new team and your robot hasn't come in yet. Maybe you're an existing team and your models haven't come in yet. The great thing about the Innovation Project is you can get started on this just from that one sentence. That is all you have to get started, and you can make progress right there from day one. Now, it's easier with your other materials, obviously, but that is the Innovation Project in a nutshell. I'm going to share one more document just briefly, and this isn't going to be anything new. This is that exact same page, but this page is on page 7 of the engineering notebook. So this is that document that all of your students will get as a registered team, or that PDF that you'll have access to through ThinkScape. One issue that I personally have right now that I need to kind of run up the flagpole at first is that nowhere in the team meeting guide, which is the document for teachers that I've been able to find, do they actually describe what the Innovation Project is. Coaches, has anybody been able to read through that? Have y'all noticed anything about that in the team meeting guide?
The only part I saw, Drew, was just that identify a specific problem related to making the transportation journey of products better. That's the only thing that's kind of been like we've had in the past. It was a straight statement.
Mhm.
That was the only thing I thought was supposed to be that.
Okay, so maybe it's in there, it's just not as obvious as I would have liked to have been. But in the engineering notebook for your students, it's right there on 1 page, everything you need to know. So that is, again, the Innovation Project in a nutshell. Are there any questions so far, just kind of about the general idea of the Innovation Project? Okay, in that case, I'm going to move along, and I'm going to change to a different document while I introduce our next speaker, Anna Strutzenberg. Anna, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello. My name's Anna. I've been working with FIRST. Well, I've been involved with FIRST for either 14 or 15 years now. I'm currently on a car ride to Atlanta at the moment, but that's why I've got my camera turned off. My favorite thing to do is Innovation Project. I've always really loved that portion of the FLL part. And I do really like the new judging rubric that they've come up with. Was that
And
a
I don't know if
question?
you can see it, but I've got the rubric shared right now.
Did somebody ask a question? Was that in the chat that I just saw?
Yes,
pop
in
up?
the chat, we've had a question about, does the prototype have to be working or workable?
For like the project?
Yep.
No. I mean, it's cool if it is, but as long as I mean, we've had people that come in with like styrofoam projects of it, just so like the judges can see something of like what the idea is.
Yeah, and I will add that there is no hard and fast requirement. Like there's no requirement for a working prototype. However, you will see pretty quickly that the teams who do better and better in the innovation project category do have that. But it's not necessarily something you have to have today or a month from now, but it is something you will probably want to have, if not by your qualifier, then certainly by the state competition.
Yeah.
And I just would add, it helps you in that create and iterate section of the rubric, because that's kind of things that are there. So the closer you can get to where you're developing a prototype or beginning there, that helps you get to that point in the rubric.
Yeah. But I wouldn't get hung up on like a prototype though. I wouldn't feel like, oh, well, we couldn't get a prototype working, so there's no point to it. Like, it's just like an added bonus. If you can get something like worked up in CAD, like I know some students will have parents that are engineers that work with CAD really well. That can sometimes be like a good way to have a prototype if you're thinking of something that's going to be really hard to prototype, as like Lego bricks or something. We've seen that in the past, and that's worked out well for some groups. But did that answer your question for the most part? Cool. All right. Does anybody else have any like questions before I just kind of start going down the list? All right, cool. So really what I want to bring up first was what got a lot of teams last year was that while it is normal for your team to be split up into like a hardware group and a software group and a project group, it's also really important that the entire team knows about the project, because it's heartbreaking when you see either a teammate gets sick, like that specific day to the competition, or they can't show up, or technology doesn't work, and then you've got a team who you can tell spent a lot of time working on a project but couldn't necessarily communicate with the judges what it was because they didn't spend enough time kind of figuring it out from the person that was in charge. So just making sure that like throughout the year, you're making sure that everyone is in touch with everything that's going on. It will really help everyone across the board, I feel.
And I would like to, as judge advisor, kind of extend what Anna said there, because that's a great point. One of the things in First Lego League Challenge is that every student does everything. They may not be the expert on everything, but just like Anna said, they need to be knowledgeable about everything.
Yeah. So I guess if we just want to go down the rubric as to like what I kind of look for in a team that's going to score 3 and 4s. A clear definition of the problem. Last year we had a lot of people which kind of generalized the problem and then never really told us what they were fixing. Like they had an idea for something, but we never really knew what the question was that they were answering. So just at the very beginning, having the team come in and be like, this is what we're trying to fix. This is the problem in cargo that we think could be fixed, is going to set the judges up to be like, okay, now I know where the base is for this. And then having clear, detailed points as to where they got the research, which is that second button. Having multiple experts or people that are, people that are experts or people that are in the field working with that, that's going to help you in that section as well. As far as the design part, this kind of goes back to your question. Like I said, it's not necessary that you have a prototype, but it is nice if you have something that the judges can see and hopefully this year maybe touch, but having us know what's inside the kid's head as far as a prototype, and then figuring out what like the plan was as far as, well, we were going to do this, because I mean, it's not likely that they came up with an idea and then like that idea was just perfect right off the bat. Like we love to hear about like, well, we came up with this and that was a mistake and it didn't work really well, but then we pivoted from that and we did this, because that shows a design process that's evident in what would happen in real life with real jobs. Making sure that when the students were coming up with a design idea, that everyone was involved in it. Again, like that everybody was knowledgeable of what was happening and had input is going to be really important for that section also. And then for the create part, sorry, there's like a really loud car outside. Just that's the model that we were talking about. I got them mixed up, but even if you have like a drawing or something worked up in CAD, something that like puts your idea out into a space where judges can see clearly what they're talking about, is going to help not only the judges, but anybody that they share it with. Like if they do go share it with experts or professionals, it's going to help you communicate that a little bit easier. And then also just again, like showing how you came up with the process, even if it wasn't a pretty journey. It's always fun to see like how kids were like, oh, well, this didn't work, but it's okay because we can deal with it this way. And this is how we pivoted. And a question that normally we ask that goes directly to that one is like, if you guys ran into a problem, like, what did you do? And that kind of applies to this and core values. So having a set way that kids can kind of handle disagreements is also going to help with that in a couple of different sections. I'll just pause for a second in case anybody has any questions. I know I'm going kind of fast.
Well, and while you're pausing, I'll add just a couple of comments there that going back to the prototype question again is it helps, like Anna said, and it is maybe something that would help judges say this team was just a little bit better than another team, but it's not going to negatively impact you if you don't have like an actual prototype. As long as you've got like a drawing, that would be something kind of along that. And back to Anna's point on the judges aren't really clear about what problem you were solving. One of the things to keep in mind and tell your students is it's great if you know what you did, but if the judges don't know what you did, it doesn't mean anything. They can't grade what they don't see and know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so kind of going back to sharing with professional, it's always really good if you can find like at least one or two professionals that will talk to you. And I know that can seem intimidating, but I promise like a lot of the time they're really excited to talk to people about it. I've very rarely had like a bad experience with going up to someone and being like, hey, I've got this FLL team who wants to talk to a professional about X. Like normally they get really excited. People are generally nice. So I wouldn't let that intimidate you. Reach out to parents. It's really likely that someone knows someone who is doing what you need to do. So that one is just like you can kind of, especially now with like Zoom calls, you can kind of easily tick that one off the box, just being like, okay, well, we talked to like 3 or 4 people about this and have them give you input. And then again, going back to your design process, from that input, how did they decide, okay, well, maybe since this person said this, we change this aspect of our project. Which, yeah, is where Drew's highlighting is you're going to find stuff that somebody who maybe does it all day is going to point out versus like you sitting in a classroom being like, this is going to work out. So it's always really interesting to figure out that there's like little things that don't work that they know don't work. So talking to a professional is really going to benefit you in a lot of different aspects. And I know you can reach out to other FLL teams to kind of figure out who they've done it before. I've had teams that have just kind of bounced off one another. And I kind of really like that because it's a nice little networking thing. But just like I said, just finding people that'll talk to you is a good way to get you in the exemplary. That's one of the kind of easier ones to make sure that they do well on.
And when you were talking about the previous point about talking to professionals, I can't remember if this was your pod last year or one of the other pods, but it's also very important to talk to the people who are going to use what you're developing. For example, in the replay game, I believe there was at least one project that was kind of geared toward people with disabilities, except it was a specific disability, and the team did not talk to people with that disability. So they weren't able to really do the project maybe as well as they could have.
Yeah. And also bouncing off of that, this year we did, or maybe it was the year before, it doesn't matter, but we had a team that told us the name of the professional they had talked to, which I actually happen to know, but they didn't know what they did. So they were like, well, we talked to like John Smith. And we were like, what does John Smith do? And they were like, he was a professional. We were like, about what? So making sure that the kids know, like, you're talking to this person because they are like this kind of a engineer or this kind of a software developer or whatever it is always really important. And then this last one, I know it was hard with the with Zoom last year, but trying to make the presentation engaging is important. Some teams will do skits, which I always find really cute. Like that's what I did when I was in FLL, where you can kind of like dress up and have cute costumes, but it's not a necessary thing. It's just something to keep the judges kind of engaged as you go through the motions of describing your product. I've had some people do like fake commercials. That's also been kind of fun and just like a different way to present it. Just finding something other than standing around and reading off of a piece of paper kind of in a monotone voice is going to help you in that part. And then just making sure, like, even if you are creating a skit, that the product that they've made or the solution that they've come up with is very clear, because there's sometimes we get skits and it's a very good skit, it's great acting, but we're not sure what the question was, we're not sure what the solution was. So it's just important to make sure that as you're writing the script, you make sure that it's centering around what the problem and the solution is.
And I'll add that this is kind of a point of contention that'll like we usually have at least a few coaches kind of miss on this, is that everything Anna just went over in the rubric, the identify, design, create, iterate, communicate, all of that has to be communicated to the judges in that 5-minute presentation. You might give them supplemental materials, but they're not going to read through those. They might go back and say, what was that thing they said in the presentation? Let me see if it's in their materials. Everything they grade you on has to come across in that presentation. If you did, like a book's worth of research, original research, and you just handed it to them and didn't talk about it, you might as well have not done it. And I'm sure Anna, who has judged for us many times, can talk about all of the documents that she has not been able to read.
I do love documents though. I love it especially when a team gives you like a very clear, concise page summary of like, this is what it is, this is what it does, this is the problem. That way, because the thing with judging is there's going to be different pods, and it's me with defending my pod versus somebody else defending their pod. So having a piece of paper to remind me how wonderful your project was in every aspect is always really beneficial in those moments of like, well, this is why this team might have done a little bit better than the team that you saw because they had X, Y, and Z. So having something in front of me that you can be like, this is a thing that happened, I remember they said this, is important. It's not necessary, and Drew's right. I can't read all of it, even though I wish I could. But having like maybe just a couple of handouts that are like real quick summaries is super beneficial. All right, well, does anybody have any questions at this point or any comments, concerns? All right, Drew, did you have anything to add to that?
I don't think so. I think that was a really good first pass at innovation project for all of our new coaches and even our experienced coaches. If they have more questions about the innovation project judging that we don't get to tonight, we do have a judging webinar scheduled for later in the month, and we'll get to do this part of the rodeo again then.
Oh, how exciting.
But that is our innovation project from a judge's perspective, and Anna can definitely answer a lot of your questions as a direct hands-on judge. But if there are no more questions on judging from what Anna's talked about or from the rubric, then I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this portion. And let me stop sharing. And again, the rubrics are available online on the FIRST website. There should be a link somewhere. I'll make sure to highlight it in my next weekly email. If you can't find it by Tuesday, you'll be able to find it Tuesday. That being said, I'm probably just going to turn it over now to Jamie to talk about the project from a coach's perspective, which I'm sure is why most of you are tuning in tonight.
So I'm going to put a link to a YouTube video in the chat, and you can kind of watch that later, but it's a very good example of what we do for the innovation project in a professional sense. This company, IDEO, basically that is their job, is to solve problems, and they make innovative solutions to solve those problems. So what they have on that video will be ABC, I think it's Frontline, does an 8-minute video about that group. And you get to watch them go through the whole planning and the whole design process, and then how they come up with their idea and how they come back and talk about their solution and how they get to an end result. You kind of get to watch it in 8 minutes, the whole innovation project. So we kind of do the same thing, except we get a lot more time. Plus, we're also having to try and teach the kids how to do those things. It's a little bit different as adults. We could come together and do those things, but the big part that we want to focus on, that I think everybody is like, well, how do I come up with what I'm going to do? So I would say the biggest thing that I originally first started doing that I don't recommend is just starting out and going straight to Google. Don't ruin the kids' impression of what the innovation project is by saying go and just research. So we got this problem about transporting goods. Go out there and just read, find some stuff on Google and find some problems. That's the quickest way to kill their imagination and creativity to get excited about it, because the innovation project really is, I mean, that's what they could be doing and for a real world job is this part. And this is where some of the coolest stuff you can come up with and the most engaging parts, and why I think my kids stayed with it even now that I have them as an FRC high school team, is because of that fact they're getting to create and come up with something that doesn't exist. So in those lines, my suggestion for you when you just get started out is go and talk to parents, talk to teachers, get your whole community involved, everybody you can possibly think of, and say, hey, we got this problem with transporting and goods. And you can be very broad and general, and get some professionals or get some field trips. I know that's not as easy to do with COVID, but you know, wear your mask, whatever you got to do, but get some kind of real world feedback and some not feedback, but research at that first get-go. Get them on the field trip, get them on a professional talking to them on a Zoom call, get them where they're actually doing something rather than just getting on a Chromebook or something and typing in and searching Google, because they're going to get bored really fast, and that's going to be tough. So once you kind of get some of those visits and some of those things coming through there, I also recommend don't look for a giant problem. You're probably not, if you go into an automotive factory and you're watching how they do their whole process, you're probably not going to go in there changing how they do the automotive line. I mean, people have been working on that for 40 and 50 years since Henry Ford started the assembly line. It's going to be tough for you to just walk in there and fix some giant thing like that. As you go through there, look for individual small things. Maybe if you get a chance to talk to some of the line workers, you can ask them, what's your biggest pet peeve about working here? If you could fix one thing about your job, what would you fix? Look for those problems to be able to define your problem by those specific examples. Don't look for a big, giant, huge problems. I think when we had water challenge, everybody was trying like, how am I going to clean water? And there's 500 solutions about that already. And none of them are just, Bill Gates is working on that. We're probably not going to out resource Bill Gates to come up with the next greatest solution there. So my thought is just that I've always done is trying to be specific. Look for something that's a specific problem that you can fix and that you can get personal experience from somebody. And once you have that personal experience and you have that kind of research done from the humans and the beings, then you can go out and do your articles, research newspapers, and see what other people have said about that. Is there other solutions out there for that? Because a lot of times you'll hear somebody's already got a problem here and it already exists. Somebody's already done that solution and it's already done. So then that's when you kind of start sitting down and start looking for, what is out there? What am I looking for? What exists that's already out there? And then that's also when you can kind of start, once you've done that, brainstorm. Now you can start brainstorming. So these things exist. This problem's out here. Is there some way we can make something exist better? Or is there some way we can reinvent that? And then that's where you can bring in, everybody can be involved. Brainstorm. IDEO does a wonderful thing. I love what they do in that video is everybody puts their plans up on a board, and then everybody gets a Post-it note and goes up there and puts Post-it note what they think of the idea. They'll put maybe a smiley face against the ones they like, or maybe they could put a sad face, or maybe they put a question on something that they saw on another one, but nobody's really critiquing like individually saying, no, that's not going to work. Nobody's kind of, killing the subject and the creative ideas. You're just giving feedback off what you're seeing, not just criticizing what they've done. And so once you get that built, and hopefully you come upon a great solution. That's always the key, is finding that solution. And sometimes you're like, oh man, this is really good. And then sometimes you're like, we wish it could be better. But from that point on, that's when you kind of get to, okay, what would it take to build this, or what would it take to make this work? You can start talking back to your professionals, the one that were out there, and you kind of go tell them, say, so this is what we thought about fixing your pet peeve on the assembly line for a car thing. What do you think if you had this? And that person will be like, that would be wonderful. Or I like that, but maybe if it had this and this, it could be even better. And then your solution starts developing from those conversations. And that gets you further along and gets you further along to thinking about prototype. And then that gives you your person that meets the stuff in the rubric to kind of go back and say, okay, I got this now. What do you think about this? And then you could go to different people. You could go to the assembly line manager and different people in the groups to talk to them and see what they think about the project. And then, like Anna said, talk to other FLL teams. I mean, it's having peer helpers is one of the great thing about FIRST, is that we'll jump in and help each other. So that's one of the great things, that we want to compete, but we also want to help each other so that we're all competing at a high level. So I definitely think reaching out to FLL teams is great to get that feedback. And then once you get to that kind of point where you're kind of on the verge of making a prototype or making sure that you're on the right track, then you kind of think about, what can I do as a theme to make this stand out, and start getting all your information and putting it into a document, and realizing, oh my gosh, this is going to be 15 minutes worth of a speech, and then start condensing it down to make sure that you highlight everything that's going to meet that exceeds on the rubric. And that's part's the key, is like when you get to the final point and you're putting your script together, you want to make sure that you highlight that the judges have no question about that. You said, if the rubric says, did they meet with professional variety of, I think usually it'll say, I don't know what is it, I forget now, but several research professionals and shared their idea. You're going to say, we met with blah, 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 but you also going to get to where it's got to be concise. So that's usually a big contention, is getting all that stuff that you do in that 15 minutes into a 5-minute presentation, and getting it all out there without being so fast that the judges are feel like their hair has been blown back because you went so fast trying to get everything. And Anna talked about stuff that she likes to see, but I'd recommend doing a one sheet that summarizes each of those points, and even just labels it out and says the problem, and then : this was our problem. Our solution, this is our solution, so that it's very easy to kind of come back to and remember. So the judges have a chance to remember what you did. In the presentation, I mean, I've always been, in the sense when I was coaching directly, is like, do something that's fun that kind of can tie into what the innovation project was. But it's important to stand out when the judges are seeing 36 teams. They can't remember that number very well. They don't hardly remember the team name very well, because I've judged too. I've been there, but I can remember what you look like and who you were when you came in the room. In the FTC, the time travelers were wonderful about that. I could always remember the group that was the Doctor Who team. I'd always know the Doctor Who team because the way their whole theming was based off that. So I always knew who that was. And whether I couldn't remember that, couldn't tell you their team number for the life of me, and I finally remembered their team name. But the fact that they were all Doctor Who dressed and had a TARDIS, I could remember what they did because I had a visual of who they were. And so the last thing that I would tell you is to reach out to some people. You can reach out to me. Obviously, I would love to. Other judges, other volunteers, anybody, parents, school professionals, other professionals and stuff, and have them ask questions of your students without you interrupting and guiding at all. Let them get used to talking to an adult and answering a question on the fly. I think that's one of the big things that kind of separates a team from one that's prepared versus one that's also prepared, is how well you answer questions. If they don't know the answer when they ask a question, like what does that professional do? Like for instance, Anna's example, that could be the difference between you be two great prepared teams that have wonderful stuff together. The fact that one kid was able to say this professional did this, and the other one saying they were a professional, could be the difference between two teams winning, one winning and one not winning, is just how much they're able to answer a question. Especially the higher level gets, the better you can answer a question is really what determines who's winning. You at the higher levels that I've seen, everybody's going to have a great presentation, everybody's going to have a great theme, they're all going to be prepared, but who can answer the question that the judges give them is the key determining factor. I know that's a lot, and in a short amount of time, trying to do that within like 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, there is so much more. And so as a first senior mentor, that's part of the things that I like to do and help. And I know I've been to Holly's last time, and I was excited to get out and see her teams. And I know we got COVID and stuff. I'm vaccinated, wear a mask, and made it so far without getting it. So I'm still open. We can Zoom. I know I've Zoomed with some teams in Mobile. So I am always open to, if you want to check in, like, you just call and ask, hey, would you just, listen to our project and see what you think and give me feedback. I'm not a judge and I'm not the partner, so I'm not judging you to win. All I can do is help you. So that's all my goal is. I no longer coach a team individually. I know my teams in Fort Payne. I have a high school team, so I don't have time to coach on a daily basis by any means. I'll go by and watch and see where they're at and give thoughts. And that's what I'd like to do for everybody, is I'd like to kind of see what you're at, see what you got going on, and then give you feedback on what I think and help you out as a mentor. So I think that was kind of my gist of what I wanted to go through. I was thinking like I'm going to go from the beginning to the end and hopefully cover what I possibly could in a short amount of time. The end. And I'll put my email address in there. Thank you, Amy, for already asking, because I would have totally just walked off and forgot that part.
And if anybody forgets his email, you can find it. He is actually one of the few people that the email each week actually gets sent to. So his email address is on every email that you get from me.
And I put my phone in there as well. You're welcome to, I teach school. So I won't be answering necessarily in the day unless it just happens to be in a planning or something, but you can text me on there, which is great. Just let me know who you are. And then that way I can reach out to you as soon as I get time. So, and then I think Taylor had said, the First in Alabama Discord is a great way to reach out to volunteers and other coaches for feedback. The more the better. I was very fortunate, and one time that we were able to go to Houston is we had Taylor came. I don't think Drew was able to make it. We had two. Louise came, and Kim Daughtry came and was able to give feedback and watch the students and everything, and just gave them great feedback and lots of helpful information. So the more feedback you get, the better you're able to move in that direction to get those things improved. I don't want to say corrected, because not all feedback's just to be corrective, but to hear some feedback enough to know what you want to improve on. So.
And if you have any questions for Jamie while you're formulating them, I do have a few points from what Jamie said I wanted to reiterate on. When he was talking about your team having an identity and the time travelers, that's a really great point, not only for the judges, but also that really plays well into your team's core values, which is another aspect of the judging process. Jamie also talked about not going straight to Google and finding your research that way. One thing that we look for in the judging process is, when you did your research, did you research from various types of sources? You didn't just do all of your research through Google. Did you talk to people? Did you read books? Did you read magazines, newspapers, multiple forms of media? And Jamie also talked about, are you improving on a solution? One of the worst things you can do for your innovation project is to have a project that is similar to an existing solution without defining what makes yours different and what makes yours innovative. If it's just like something else and you don't explain that, the judges are going to score it lower, just because it's not innovative if they don't know why it's innovative.
I would put insert there, Drew, at one of the tournaments we had. I think it was the exercise. I always forget names, but we had a group had a fitness suit that had bands in it that was helping you exercise as you were doing stuff. Another team had the exact same thing, and that would be in a case where the prototype did help us, because that kind of showed that we were further along in getting feedback and getting information back about our solution. That team had kind of got to that point where they had the idea and started working on a prototype, but we had a prototype and got feedback from the professionals about the prototype. So we were a little bit further along ahead. So that helped us be ahead of that team if you were judging on a rubric.
Exactly. Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to point out was when Jamie was talking about scale of the problem, your team is probably not going to be able to get giant ships unstuck from the Suez Canal, but they might be able to improve how grandma gets her Amazon packages. So that's kind of what we mean when we're looking at the scale here. But that was another great point that I wanted to highlight on, especially in the context of the current season. And I believe that's all we had planned for tonight. So unless there are any other questions, or if anybody has anything else they want to add, now would be a great time to do it.
I guess one thing I was mentioning is my IDEO video does have 2 cuss words in it, or 1 cuss word. I think they say DAMN, and they do talk about packaging of condoms or something at some point. So if you decide to go show that to your kids, know that there's I wouldn't. I mean, most of the kids are going to know, but just so you know, one of them, it does say the word condoms. If somebody starts asking, what's a condom? You're prepared.
We are by no means encouraging coaches to show videos to their students without watching them first.
So you make the decision if you want to show that video, but for you should watch the video, because it's very cool watching that in a professional real world case. Yeah, sure. So to recap on the project, to answer Amy's question, let me get that shared up. So this is the page on the innovation project in the overview, and this is also in the students' engineering notebook.
The challenge this year in the innovation project is how can you improve the transportation of products? That in itself is the question, and the rest in this page is details. But you want to identify a specific problem in relation to this question. You can start out with a few and kind of narrow it down, just like Jamie was talking about. And you do that through your research. And as you're researching, you can start developing solutions to more than one problem, but you want to try to narrow that down quickly so that you can move on to this phase where you're going to design and create something new. And then once you have that something new, you want to make sure that you're sharing your ideas, you're getting feedback. And as you share the idea and get that feedback, you are making changes and improving your project as you go through this process. And finally, you want to create that 5-minute presentation where you explain everything in 5 minutes to the judges. Great. Are there other questions? And I'll leave this up for a few minutes.
And I would also, if you're a rookie coach, don't get overwhelmed. It can be very, very, very overwhelming with all the information that's out there. I don't know how many we might have of this rookie, but you know, as we went into FRC with my high school team, that first year is just, we're going to do the best we can, and we're going to absorb and learn and you know, just get better, and then we'll worry about next year of actually, you know, really getting, you know, everything detailed and work on the competing harder. First year is about learning, so don't worry about, you know, don't worry about if everything's not going right. You're learning, and that will make better everything better next time.
Well, if there are no other questions, I think we will go ahead and wrap up for tonight. Thank you all for coming. This is the first time we've done this, and we hope we keep going with it. We got about 4 more sessions already planned. Don't forget, next week we're talking about how do you do this with your teams. If you've got team members who are quarantined, if your kids are meeting virtually, how do you do FLL Challenge in the time of COVID? So that we can make sure everybody is progressing along. But again, each week we send the weekly email. You'll get updates quicker if you're on the Discord. We usually post like big announcements there, like as soon as they happen. And if you're eligible for any grants, make sure you're applying for them. Yeah, so that's all I have. So if you're ready to go, you can head out, and we'll stay on until nobody else is left. And that appears to be the last person. So I'm going to stop my recording and my screen sharing, and this will wrap up